The 1970s is arguably the greatest decade in cinema history. Let's break down the 70 best films from the 1970s.
What's up, movie friends? Welcome back to Raiders of the Lost podcast, the ultimate film and TV podcast. Today, we're going to discuss what is considered the golden age of cinema, and that is the 1970s, a decade in which many of the greatest films were ever made, many of the greatest filmmakers emerged, and we got huge films like Star Wars, we got A Clockwork Orange, Jaws, The Exorcist, as well as David Lynch coming out with some new films. Man, the 1970s were phenomenal, as well as on the international market. I can't wait to break down what we think are the 70 best films of this decade.
The 1970s was a special era, it looks like and feels like to have been alive. I mean, not just cinema and movies, but the music as well. The culture is pretty exciting too, just coming off the 1960s and 50s. An explosion of cultural creativity, color, experimentation. So I think that the 1970s may be the best decade we've ever experienced when it comes to art, storytelling, with cinema, with music.
Music, oh yeah.
TV in a lot of ways as well was booming in the 1970s, although we're in a golden age right now of television too. But I this is one of those decades where you often think to yourself, I wish I grew up in the 1970s. They had Led Zeppelin and the Stones, and they had freaking The Godfather was in theaters. Like, this is incredible. This is what a decade to be alive. But I think we had so many great movies. Anthony and I have always been drawn to this decade because the artistry in the cinema, also something about the film stock I really connect with really well, because the film stock from the 1970s, I always think that you can kind of tell a movie what decade it was based on the film stock being used, what was popular at the time, or cheapest or most commonly used. And the 1970s film stock, to me, always looks terrific.
As well as the kinds of lenses they were using. And I love when modern filmmakers will use vintage lenses, because it does harken back to that era and the feel. Like Chris Nolan uses this 50 millimeter lens from the 1960s that looks fantastic in all his films. And I mean, we get the emergences of so many huge names. Jack Nicholson absolutely crushed the 1970s. Al Pacino, Gene Hackman, incredible, huge superstars, and some of the greatest actors that have ever lived. They really came out into their own in the 1970s. And this is a period where directors and writers are really given a lot of creative freedom to really do whatever they wanted. This is why in the 1970s, a lot of the films were really pushing the boundaries, going very extreme at times, and doing a lot of things with storytelling and with characters that definitely wouldn't fly today. And a lot of studios would be regulating them and controlling them and preventing the filmmakers from really expressing the true uniqueness of their storytelling. And so in the 1980s, the studios and corporations started growing larger, and they started having more control over the films they were producing and funding. This is a time in the 1970s where studios were just hiring really artistic auteur filmmakers to make their big movies, and that's why they feel, I think, in terms of storytelling and writing, like a league of their own in this untapped magical resource of freedom that we don't really have in Hollywood as much to that degree anymore.
I feel like movies from the 70s feel like books.
Yeah.
They're so immersive. They're so creative. They're just incredible stories. Not that we don't get movies today that feel like that as well, but I think it's just a different style. You know, nothing really today feels like it was made from the 1970s. Here and there, I mean, The Holdovers is a movie that feels like recently was plucked from the 1970s. But this era, it just feels like every time you watch one of these movies, you're entering a dense world, a story that is just on a different level, that's told very specially. For the most part, for the great movies. Obviously, there's the cheesy bad ones from the 1970s as well. But let's get into our list.
Oh, yeah.
How about number 70? We start with an incredible revenge action flick. And if you're a fan of the Kill Bill franchise, this is one of the biggest influences of Quentin Tarantino on that film, as well as the character of Beatrix Kiddo and Oren Ishii. We have Lady Snowblood, which came out in 1973, directed by Toshiya Fujita. This is an epic revenge tale, a samurai movie, a female samurai movie about this woman whose mother is left to die and rot in a prison while dies during childbirth after she is raped by some men on a voyage that they're on a carriage traveling. And it's just epic. The cinematography, the sound stages, the production design, the blood, the gore. It's so creative. It's colorful. I watched this for the first time, I think, 2 years ago per your recommendation, and I was just so happy that I did because it's an absolute blast. You'll scream like, oh my God, multiple times when you watch this movie. It's freaking sick.
And Tarantino pulled a lot of the same music from this film as well. So the DNA of Kill Bill really is mostly thanks to Lady Snowblood. And it's an incredible samurai action film. And like you mentioned, the sound stages, there are sound stages, but they that still works, like this theatrical kind of feeling to it. All right, next up at number 69, we got our boy Steven Spielberg. We always got to put him on one of these lists with Duel, his big breakout as a director, which came out in 1971. This is about a man driving across the country on a lone freeway who starts being terrorized and tormented by some massive truck. The driver seems to be like out to get this guy. There are a bunch of clashes. This guy's just trying to get out and continue his journey and get out unscathed and alive. It starts out kind of tense, and then it just compounds with every scene. The stakes rise, they get higher, they get more dramatic, they get more conflicting, and the scope of it gets much bigger. We get other characters involved, but it is an incredible, precise action film. Great stunt work with the driving, incredible editing, and some really cool camera angles that only Spielberg could come up with for such a low budget. This was a very successful film and proved his prowess as a director.
And before we get more into the 70 best movies from the 1970s, we have to let you know we just started a crowdfund campaign for our latest film, One Click. It's on Indiegogo right now. Go support and donate. We'll put links in the description of this episode on all platforms, audio and YouTube. Anything you can give will help us make this film. It's going to be an action thriller. We're going to do some crazy stunts like blow up a car, but we need your help to make it possible. So go donate now to One Click. Let's get into a superhero film with Superman back in 1978, directed by Richard Donner, starring the great and late Christopher Reeve, as well as Marlon Brando, Gene Hackman, and Margot Kidder. And this is a story we all know now because we've seen it done so many times, of Jor-El sending his infant son to a different planet, to Earth, as Krypton is being destroyed.
None other than Marlon Brando.
Marlon Brando plays Jor-El, which is really incredible. And Glenn Ford is John Kent. This movie's excellent special effects are fantastic, and also the very hopeful and light version of Superman, which we haven't really gotten too often lately. Obviously, I love Cavill and Zack Snyder's Superman. Those movies are dark, though, to an extent. We had, Superman. What was the one that Singer did?
Superman Returns.
Where
he had no personality.
It's very light, but yeah, no personality. Just a wooden plank. A wooden plank that someone drew a face on. Just kidding. It's a good movie.
Is it?
I think it's pretty good.
It's pretty good.
It's pretty good. Yeah. But I think this movie is what James Gunn's going for, is bringing the lightness back to Superman, the optimism, the hopefulness, and this movie is just an epic all-time classic.
Yeah, and it was heavily influential for Nolan when he made Batman. He really took this film into account when he was writing that one. All right, next up at number 67, we got our first Dustin Hoffman film. Now, Dustin Hoffman was one of the biggest stars of the 1970s. He was on a tear in that decade. Now, this is the original, in my opinion, the original great home invasion film, and that's Straw Dogs. So if you're a fan of movies like The Strangers or any kind of movie where people are being attacked or tormented from outside forces outside of a home trying to break in, Straw Dogs is the true OG great version of that. Now, this is about he and his wife have just moved into a new summer home, and they start getting these strange vibes from these rough nearby guys who they seem to be threatening to him, and they seem to have very intense inclinations towards his wife, and it leads into ultimately. This is also remade in 2008 with Skarsgård and Kate Bosworth. It leads to them trying to break into their home and kill the couple. And Dustin Hoffman is someone who's meek, very insecure, not kind of a coward, and he has to become a protector of his home against these outside forces. It's a really cool, tight, taut action film. Very brutal violence, but it's such a good ride. I really love this film. It's one of the best tense thrillers on the list.
Let's get into a musical. One of the best from the decade, if not the best, is All That Jazz, directed by Bob Fosse. Starring
multi-talented,
starring
great choreographer, theatrical director, musical director, and film director.
Roy Scheider, who will not. This is not the first movie on this list. You'll all recognize him later on. Who plays a choreographer who's making a film, upcoming Hollywood film, but he's putting together a stage play and sort of unraveling into this insane nonstop life of choreographing popping pills, sleeping with woman after woman after woman. It's sort of a fantastical Black Swan in a lot of ways, but more of a lighter tone. But he's insanely overwhelmed. It's a great film for people who like movies that stress you out or just nonstop pace and action, sort of like a Safdie Brothers film, but great musical theater, great jazz. It's an excellent film, awesome choreography.
Beautiful film, incredible filmmaking in cinematography. It's just a stunning set piece, one after the other. It's a great film. All right, next up at number 65, we have our first Italian film on this list, A Special Day, directed by Ettore Scola. And this is starring probably two of Italy's most iconic actors in film history. We got Sophia Loren and Marcello Mastroianni, who both had legendary careers partly in Italy and then also partly in America for Sophia Loren. This is a really great World War II film, not really about war or armies, but it takes place in Italy. And this is the day that Hitler visits Mussolini in the late 1930s. And then these two characters play neighbors. Sophia Loren is a housewife with a bunch of kids, and then Mastroianni is a neighbor. And they both meet on this day, and they have kind of like and you can imagine kind of like a before sense storyline where they've connected. Although it's very troubling times, they're trying to make sense of what's happening to their country, and they also have an undeniable bond and kinship. And so they're trying to make sense of how their world is changing, how their country is changing for the worse. Great film, one of the best Italian films of the entire decade.
Let's talk about a prison escape film.
Yes,
Papillon, which came out in 1973, starring two legends. We have Steve McQueen and Dustin Hoffman. Steve McQueen is the main character. He plays Papillon, who's in this prison camp in French Guiana to serve out his sentence as a convicted murderer. And then he meets a forger played by Dustin Hoffman, and the two scheme together to work on an escape from this hellhole, this prison with horrible conditions, solitary confinement. It won't be the last prison escape film on this list because that was a hot genre in the 60s and 70s.
Yeah.
The 70s especially.
Prisons were hot.
Prison escapes were pretty big.
Just like how nuns and priests are so hot right now.
2024, the year of evil nuns and evil priests, is just on fire. There's already been 3 movies released this year about that we know of, probably more. But Papillon's an all-timer. It's a classic, directed by Franklin J. Schaffner, but a terrific cast.
Two
led
superstars,
by two
man.
legends,
Oh
man.
my God,
And
so great.
This is Dustin Hoffman coming 5 years off of The Graduate, so he's just a mega star at the time.
Dude, he was destroying the 70s.
McQueen was one of the biggest stars alive, too.
Destroying the 70s. All right, next up at number 63, we have a James Bond film. Now, the 70s were not the best time for Bond movies. The quality,
flops.
The quality had dipped a bit. Although we did have a good one with Roger Moore, The Spy Who Loved Me. This is about James Bond's trying to stop a real estate magnate from destroying New York City with a nuclear bomb. Great pairing, good comedy, good action. We get one of the most famous henchmen in James Bond history, and that's the henchman of Jaws. Overall, the overall villain is not quite as strong, but it is entertaining. Some good stunt sequences, and then also it has some reminiscent ideas and looks and locations as something like Skyfall, which I think was taking nods to this film, as well as a few of the other Bond films. But overall, really good movie.
All right, let's get into number 62 on our list. We have a Robert Redford, Faye Dunaway, and Max von Sydow film. We have 3 Days of the Condor, which is a movie about Robert Redford playing a CIA agent, which is not the only time he's done this before. A common trend in his career as he got later on in his filmography. Directed by Sidney Pollack. This is a classic. It's a great, great cast. I mean, Faye Dunaway is a legend, but Max von Sydow as well with Robert Redford.
It's got one of the best first acts where he's just an analyst and a coder at his
It's
outfit.
like a Jack Ryan movie before Jack Ryan movies were Jack Ryan movies.
Yeah, he works in a small outfit, which is like hidden in New York in just like an apartment. And he has a bunch of people in the apartment that work for the CIA secretly. He goes out for lunch and he comes back, they're all dead. And then he goes on the run. He has to figure out what the hell's going on, and the CIA thinks he did it. So it's
a great plot.
Yeah, it's a fantastic plot. It's very much like the Jason Bourne before Bourne. You know what I mean? It's a really awesome film. Faye Dunaway and Redford were a perfect pairing. They're so blonde. So blonde! But they are a very good looking couple, and they bounce off each other really well. It's a really fantastic thriller. All right, next up, we finally got our first slasher film, because slashers were big in the 70s. We have, at number 61, Dario Argento's Deep Red. Now, if you're excited for Maxine, you should check out this movie, as well as a few others from De Palma, like Dress to Kill and Sisters. Deep Red is a great Italian slasher film about a man trying to investigate the murder of a woman he saw it happening outside of at her window. He's in Italy. He's trying to uncover this mystery of what happened to this woman and who's carrying out these series of murders. It's a great slasher. It is one of the best for sure. Super stylish, very pulpy, great score. Awesome villain, just great imagery. Overall, it's an extremely entertaining film with some really, honestly, really good scares that I guarantee will make you jump.
Let's get into some French New Wave.
Yes.
With Day for Night, one of Anthony's favorite eras in cinema history. Came out in 1973, directed by Francois Truffaut, and starring... Who's in this movie? I can't remember.
He has his regular collaborators in this.
Regular collaborators, which we'll get to in a moment. Oh, it's Valentina Cortese and Jean-Pierre Laud. And I haven't seen this movie.
Oh, I'll talk about it.
So please talk about it.
I was like, he's struggling here. Day for Night is the greatest, in my opinion, the greatest film about filmmaking. So Truffaut actually plays the director of the film, ironically, even though he's also the director of this film. So it's kind of meta. And so he's trying to put together this movie. It's a pretty big scale. And it's a great depiction of behind the scenes of a set, making scenes. It's just very, in a way, meta because we're filming cameras as they're filming a scene. And it ties together great characters and comedy. We get a great sense of like behind the scenes drama, the actors maybe hooking up or having drama between one another, the crew hanging out and having fun, problems happening on set, stunts that don't go right, trying to capture the right shot at the right moment. There's so much to this film that really works. It's extremely entertaining, very funny, but ultimately, it's a perfect film for those of you who love filmmaking and are fans of what it takes to what goes into making a movie. So I highly recommend checking out Day for Night. It's a great French film. All right, next up, at number 59, we have our first Terrence Malick film, Badlands, which is his version of like a Bonnie and Clyde-esque film based upon a true story of this young couple who went on the run on a murder spree. Martin Sheen and Sissy Spacek are the two leads of this film. He plays a kind of a drifter who courts her and takes her and convinces her to leave her home, and they go on not so much a murder spree, but they want to live, they want to be free, they want to do their own thing.
He's more of the bad guy.
Yeah, he's the bad guy. But she is absolutely infatuated by him, and he's very charming to her, and they do love each other, although he does commit some heinous crimes. This movie is meditative, dark, but also beautifully filmed, like any Terrence Malick film. On top of that, it has a fucking kick-ass chase scene. The car chase scene at the end of this film is phenomenal. It's really propulsive, well shot, exciting, and very physical and violent. I really love this film. And it's a precursor to what his career would become. You got the sense of the tone, the storytelling angle, the narration, the sense of like a dreamlike quality for half the film. So I really love Badlands. If you like Terrence Malick's films, check out this early film from him.
Next up, we have a Clint Eastwood revenge cowboy western.
Nice.
We have The Outlaw Josie Wales, which we talked about in our western episode. Came out in 1973 that he stars in and also 1976. He stars in and also directed. And he plays this man whose his wife and child are murdered in front of him by Union soldiers. He joins the Confederate Army to try to get revenge. The war ends, but he refuses to surrender, and he goes out on another path of revenge to try to get the people who killed his family. And it's fantastic filmmaking, spectacles left and right, plus maybe the coolest movie poster of all time, with him just firing two massive revolvers.
It's up there.
It's up there. It's a cool movie.
All right, next up at number 57, we got our first comedy on this list, and it's an all-timer. We have Animal House, which came out in 1978, and is an absolute icon and a precursor for the teen college comedies we would come to see the decades following this. Led by a great cast, John Belushi steals every scene he's in. John Landis directed this film. He's a great comedic director for some of the landmark comedies of the 70s, 80s, and 90s. And Animal House is just legendary. We watched this as kids thinking it was just hysterical. I really hope that the younger generations can find this film and see how magical it is and how full of life it is and how unique it is in the comedy genre. It's so much fun, so many great scenes, so much great music. I just really love this. The party scenes, this really was ahead of its time for capturing teen life and college life. American Graffiti, that before this did a very good job of capturing life of teens in the 1950s, and then Animal House captured it for the time it was made really well.
And the young adults.
Young adults, yes.
And I mean, if you like Van Wilder, this is the timeless version of Van Wilder in a lot of ways. It's really great. And obviously those movies, like Andy said, are heavily influenced by Animal House. Next up, we have another Richard Donner film. We have The Omen, the original The Omen, not The Omen, the first Omen, the Omen reboot, The Omen whatever, the 17 Omens they've made, but the original Omen starring Gregory Peck of the devil being born as a child, as this character named Damien, who's just causing terrible things to happen around the family, animals, everything. It's a classic. It's scary. It's so cool. And it's obviously an IP that's lived on because they're still trying to milk it, especially the last couple of years.
Especially this year.
The first Omen came out this year with, evil nuns, evil priests, kind of all in there again. So that's the year of evil nuns and priests.
Yeah, it's upon us.
It's upon us with The Omen, the first Omen, but this is the original.
The Omen's a great film. It's a great horror film. I love it. Oh my God, it's so good.
Great cat acting, too.
And dog acting. Just so many animals in this. It's wonderful. And child acting. The kid who plays Damien's great.
Pretty damn scary.
All right, next up at number 55, we have our first Brian De Palma film. He really came out into the 80s, but he had a couple of good ones in the 70s. And one of my favorites is Phantom of the Paradise, which I'm so happy is finding new life in this generation, in this year. It is up at a 4.1 on Letterboxd.
Woo!
Highly regarded. And young people, I was looking through it the other day, and young people are loving this movie, which is really, it just warms my heart because it's such a cool movie. Phantom of the Paradise is basically Brian De Palma's version of Phantom of the Opera. It's just rock heavy. It's super weird, scary, and just like out all over the place. So it's about this musician who's dreaming of becoming a star, and he signs a deal with a record producer who ends up stealing all of his music for himself, and then trying to get back at the record producer. It backfires. The man is framed for drug dealing. He's sent to prison. He's disfigured. Becomes like a monstrous person. And then he escapes and tries to get back at the record producer. The record producer basically lives and runs this huge opera rock house called the Paradise. And so this musician becomes the Phantom of the Paradise. Just like the Phantom of the Opera haunting the opera house, he's haunting the Paradise and trying to seek revenge and play his music. It's so fucking out there. It's incredible. You've never seen anything like it before. It's scary. It's funny. It's got great music, incredible characters, costume, makeup. There's really... I'm telling you, there's nothing like this movie, and there's a reason why it's being highly regarded now, just as it was in the 70s, and it showed that Brian De Palma really was a unique visionary of his time.
We talked about it really recently. What episode did we chat about it on?
Best horror movies you never heard of.
That's what it was.
Never seen.
Very cool. Let's move into some disco. One of the most all-time classic dance movies from this era. Birthed a star in John Travolta.
Birthed him
because in 1977, Saturday Night Fever made $237 million at the box office.
Wow.
And it's a banger of a movie. It's so fun. It's engaging. It's light, but the dancing is terrific. And Travolta is such a star in this movie. Such a goddamn stud, too. The fucking jawline in this film. So nice. The hair, everything. The guy is just walks with so much swagger.
An Italian god.
Basically, and he plays a character, this guy who, during the weekdays, he just works in a paint store, nothing crazy, he's a clerk. But on the weekends, when he goes out to the club, to disco, he is a star. He is somebody at the disco. We have obviously feuds like sort of classic 1960s, 70s musicals with other people and rivalries, but there's a big dance competition, and he recruits the gorgeous Stephanie to help dance with him to try to win the competition. It's awesome. And also, the way he eats 2 slices of pizza at the same time in this movie is legendary. He just puts them on top of each other and just bends it. That's how you do it, baby. That's how you do it.
He's the man. He's the man. All right, speaking of successful movies, we have one of the biggest hits of the 1970s, as well as the another birth of a huge star.
Well, this isn't the birth of him.
In a big way, Enter the Dragon, starring Bruce Lee, which, on a budget of $850,000, grossed $400 million globally.
Holy fucking shit.
$400 million.
In 1970s.
I can't believe that.
That's like
unbelievable.
gotta be what, $900 million today, maybe a bill.
Close to a bill. And it showed his star power and his charisma and his absolute talent as a performer. Enter the Dragon is one of the most iconic landmark martial arts films. It's entertaining. It's got great characters. And Bruce Lee became a household name and a superstar after this. After starring in TV for so long and doing some films before this, Enter the Dragon was his huge coming out for the entire world, and it did not disappoint. This is an iconic, legendary film. And some of the great moments of martial arts history are in this movie.
Let's talk about a Hitchcock film now, a horror film we talked about in that episode, Best Horror Movies You've Never Seen. Frenzy, which takes place in London when there's a suicidal murderer, a serial murderer attacking people and murdering them with neckties. And we follow an ex-Air Force officer, whose wife is murdered by the serial killer, and he must go on the run himself so he doesn't become a victim himself. It's excellent filmmaking, great suspense, obviously. 1972 with this film from Hitchcock.
Incredible. Still kicking. All right, next up, we got our first Martin Scorsese film. But not the last one on this list, obviously, because it's the 1970s. We have Mean Streets, his big breakout as a director and writer, obviously starring Harvey Keitel and Robert De Niro, two of his regular collaborators. And this is really this is probably his most personal film still to this day, depicting the world of New York amongst small-time crooks and gangsters and the church as well. This is an incredible film. It's so well crafted and unique, and he's really capturing an essence of life for these people as opposed to truly telling a story with a plot. The plot really is that, there's some money troubles for De Niro's character, Johnny Boy, and he keeps making life for his friend Charlie difficult, especially with the people he's connected with, causing fights. I love the pool hall fight. It's such a cool scene. But there's so many cool moments that, like, it's more about a tone and a feeling than it is a story. Like when the friend shows him the tiger he has in the back room that he bought off a guy. Moments like that. It ends in a really great climactic, violent moment that still just like is seared into the back of your mind. Ultimately, this is just a big coming out party for Martin Scorsese, capturing some of the things we come to know from him, many things that so many other filmmakers have pulled from him, whether it be strapping the camera to a person or using intense red lights and in slow motion push-ins while a cool rock song plays. These are things that really Martin Scorsese pretty much invented in a way for filmmaking.
He's a legend. This one's still one of his best. In 1972,
yes,
the next on our list, we have Solaris from Andrei Tarkovsky, which is sort of his response to 2001: A Space Odyssey. And this is a lot more of a cerebral exploration of the mind as we follow a cosmonaut psychologist who's sent to a space station orbiting a planet called Solaris and trying to understand what's going on with the cosmonauts on that station, their mental problems. And it's sort of an alien movie to an extent.
Yeah.
About, I don't want to spoil it too much, but there's something happening with the water on the surface of that planet that's affecting the cosmonauts, as they call them in the film. It's cerebral. It's really kind of a psychological thriller as well.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a trip. Tarkovsky movies always are. And this one will make you think a lot, but it's interesting because I think I read that he didn't love 2001: A Space Odyssey, so like this was kind of his response to Kubrick.
I get that. It's a challenging film. I mean, in the first act of the movie, we have literally a 10-minute sequence of a character driving with this crazy music and sound design playing. He really messes with the audience, but when you push through this film, it's really worth it. It has some really cool ideas about life and death and about existence and about being manipulated by a being or a dimensional being that is much higher on a higher level plane than you. It's a really fascinating film, and it's just so many other filmmakers have obviously used this in his other films as inspiration. Soderbergh made a adaptation of this as well. It's pretty good with Clooney, but it's not as metaphysical or out there and ambiguous as this film is. It's incredible. All right, next up we have another classic horror film from 1973 at number 49 on our list. We have The Wicker Man, which is one of the weirdest, amazing, horrific, wild, strange horror films of all time. It's got a fucking incredible conclusion, amazing finale, but it's also just super weird. Like this inspector comes to this island looking for a missing person, but everyone on this island is just like odd. They're strangely nice, but also not helping, and he keeps finding himself just like bewildered by what exactly is going on. Is everyone in on something together, or is just everybody on this island just very strange? He's trying to solve this mystery, and he keeps interacting with these random people amongst the islanders, as well as regular interactions with basically the local leader, played by Christopher Lee, Lord Summerisle. But he also finds that there's like paganism rituals, and these people live in a way that nobody else really does. And it all leads to this insane third act of the movie that is just still to this day one of the most iconic conclusions to a horror film.
Let's get into an Ingmar Bergman film starring Ingrid Bergman. We are going to do Autumn Sonata. Now, Ingrid plays a classical pianist who has been abroad from her family, pursuing her career, but eventually comes home to the troubled relationship of her daughter and hers after sacrificing basically being a mother to her for so many years, and then opening all these emotional wounds, and then also discovering that her other daughter, who is mentally handicapped and mentally impaired, has been released and is out of the asylum living with Ava and dealing with the conflicts of what that means to the family.
It's very intense and very dramatic, but it's so powerful. He's just he was an incredible writer and filmmaker, and his stories were both personal and deeply intimate, as well as metaphorical and very large in scale in terms of their ideas. This is one of his best films. The 60s and 50s were really the highlights of his career, but this is definitely the best thing he did in the 70s. All right, next up at number 55. Nope, sorry, we're in the 40s.
We're in the 40s, bro.
47. We're at 47.
Way off.
That was Samsonite. I was
Swanson.
way
Samson.
We have, from Dario Argento, another Italian giallo film, probably the most iconic of all, Suspiria, which came out in 1977, starring Jessica Harper, who plays Susie, a dancer who travels to Germany to attend a ballet school. However, when she arrives, things are not what she seems. It's an incredible display of cinematography and lighting that had never been done before. Great color, great thrills, shocking, great prosthetics, body horror. It's just bloody, horrific, so entertaining. And then also one of the most iconic scores in a horror film of all time. This is just one of a kind, and truly there's nothing like Suspiria. Also, it does have a very good remake, I will say.
Let's do another Clint Eastwood one.
Yes.
A classic tough guy cop movie for him. We have Dirty Harry, which came out in 1971. He did not direct this film, but it's also loosely based off of the Zodiac Killer and the real killings in San Francisco. And this is a franchise that had multiple sequels, and one of his most iconic characters, one of the best lines ever. And this actually, if you remember in Zodiac, they go to see this movie.
Yes.
And then
Sick reference.
Yeah, sick reference, bro. Your references are out of control. Everybody knows that. So Mark Ruffalo's character is in the theater watching it while the investigation's happening about the Zodiac. And then obviously Jake Gyllenhaal's character approaches him outside the theater. And he's like, forget it, man. They're already making movies about it. It's over. Like, no one cares anymore. And this is the movie that's playing in the theater.
You're going to catch him.
But it's a classic. It hasn't aged well. There's some pretty bad jokes in there. Like there are scenes of there's a new female officers are being introduced to the police force, and Dirty Harry's like, "What are they doing here?" Basically,
Oh my God,
it's fucked up.
That's an awkward scene.
Yeah, there's some shit like that where
She's very capable,
Yeah.
but he's like, I don't know.
What's a woman doing here? It's pretty bad.
Do I want to trust someone with my life? I'm like, oh man,
So
but
it hasn't aged well, but it's still a badass movie.
once it gets going, it's great.
It's sick.
Yeah, and they made a bunch of these. I think they made 5 Dirty Harry movies. It's one of the best lines ever, and then it's a great finale too. Great shootout. Oh man, it's fucking awesome. All right, next up at number 45, we have another Martin Scorsese film, and it's one that If you haven't seen it, I really hope you check it out. It's one of his lesser seen films, and this is Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore, starring Ellen Burstyn, and a great young performance from Alfred Lutter, is playing her son. And so Ellen Burstyn plays Alice, who is traveling the country after recently being divorced, losing her husband, and she's trying to make sense of the world. She's trying to provide for her son, a single mom. They have nowhere to live. They're bouncing around from motel to motel. She's bouncing around job to job until she finally settles on a pretty decent gig as a waitress at a diner and meets a man named David, played by Chris Christopherson, who she hopes could provide a stable life and a stable partnership with, and be maybe a father to his son. This is, in my opinion, one of the best family dramas of all time, and it's just an incredible display of character, led by one of Ellen Bernstein's greatest performances. She's an Oscar winner. You'll see her again on this list for sure, but it's a remarkable film. It's deeply personal, and I think anybody can relate to a movie like this. And this is a movie for mothers. If you're a mom, watch this movie, and you will absolutely adore it. I guarantee it. Let's get into a war film, Patton, which came out in 1970, which is based off General George S. Patton, the World War II hero. And the film covers his wartime activities and his wartime accomplishments, as well as his campaign in North Africa and removal from command in his outspoken criticism of U.S. post-war military strategy, directed by Franklin J. Schaffner, starring George C. Scott. George C. Scott. All right, next up at number 43. A film from David Lean, the great British director who made films like Lawrence of Arabia and Dr. Zhivago.
This is turning into a trend. How many episodes in a row can Anthony bring up Lawrence of Arabia?
Got it in. As much as you can bring up, dude.
I mean, you're at like 4 in a row right now. I was at like 20.
He just happens, hey, it's not my fault he directed Lawrence of Arabia, one of the greatest films of all time. But obviously that was not in the 1970s. Ryan's Daughter is David Lean's masterpiece from the 1970s. I discovered this film actually because I saw Christopher Nolan and Cillian Murphy talking about it. And it's a movie I'd never seen until I watched it last year. They were at in France. There's a really great DVD store that filmmakers and actors go at, part of press, and
the Criterion Cluster, which is in New York.
Yeah, this one's in France, and it's not like
it's a little bigger.
Yeah, but it's like the last like DVD store in a way. And so filmmakers and actors, they go there and tour what they have on selection there. And it's really great. But it's very similar to the Criterion where they interview them there. In this interview, it was Cillian and Chris Nolan pulled out a DVD of Ryan's Daughter, and he was talking about it. And he's like, I actually have a film print of this at home, and it's just one of my favorite films. And Cillian's like, oh, I would love to see that. And Nolan's like, yeah, next time you're over, we'll watch it. I was like, man, I wish I want to go watch some film
Probably
prints.
Comes over all the time.
Yeah, I want to watch some film prints in Nolan's home. And then after that interview, like that night, I watched it. I believe it was on Max, or I rented it. It's a phenomenal film. It's absolutely staggering in its imagery and cinematography. It's one of the most beautiful films I've ever seen in my life. And it's set in Ireland, and what happens is this young woman is desperately in love with an older man. He's the local school teacher. He doesn't want to marry a woman so young because he wants her to live a life, and he's too old for her. But he does end up giving in because she's so desperately desiring to marry him. They fall in love and they get married. However, she quickly learns that, you know what, he was probably right. He is quite old for me, and I don't think I truly love him. She does fall in love with a local soldier who was stationed at a military station nearby. And so this romance blossoms between these two young people, and then the husband, who is now fallen in love with the woman he's married, is extremely filled with despair to learn of this extramarital affair. And on top of that, there's this huge climactic moment on the rocky banks of the shore that the local town is involved in, as well as local Irishmen are smuggling weapons for rebels. So there's a lot going on in this film, but it's balanced perfectly. It's an epic. It's 3 hours and 15 minutes. David Lean always made epics, and it's just like you said, movies often felt like novels. Ryan's Daughter feels like, when you watch it, I felt like I read a really dense, incredible classic novel. And I just really adored it. If you're interested in cinematography, This is a movie you have to check out, Ryan's Daughter.
Let's get into a Werner Herzog film from 1972. We have Aguirre, The Wrath of God, which is about an expedition going into discovery
The road of El Dorado.
Trying to find El Dorado, the mythical city of gold. And it's about this main character named Don Lope de Aguirre, who, as the expedition keeps getting deeper into the Amazonian jungle, the power struggle gets more and more volatile. He's trying to seek as much power as possible because of getting closer to El Dorado if possible, as well as getting deeper into the jungle. He just becomes more of an antagonist, trying to seize control of the group. This expedition of conquistadors going into and trying to discover El Dorado.
And there's just like incredible like giant set pieces in this film. Like there's a scene where the men are trying. I think they're pulling like a boat up a mountain, if I remember correctly. It reminds me of Sorcerer, the Friedkin film, where they shot it in this treacherous landscape for real, and it was apparently like extremely difficult to even pull off. But Werner Herzog just kept chugging along. It was an impossible movie to make, but when you see it, you're like, it's one of those movies where you're like, how the fuck did they film this stuff? It's unbelievable. And Werner Herzog is like the most eclectic filmmaker of all time. Next up, we got another Clint movie, another superstar of the 70s. At number 41, another prison movie, Escape from Alcatraz.
Hell yeah, I love this movie.
Which is top-tier prison movie, in my opinion. And this stars Clint Eastwood, obviously, as Frank Morris, a hardened con with a history of prison breaks. However, he is sent to Alcatraz prison, which is notorious for being inescapable. That doesn't stop him from creating a master plan with a couple of other dudes to try and break out of the notorious prison. This is just a really cool, tough movie. Very simple, but perfectly directed by Don Siegel, who was a big director in the 70s and 80s. And it's just a phenomenal movie. One of Clint's best performances. And my God, once it happens, I mean, once the escape happens, you know an escape is happening. I won't tell you if they succeed or not, but once that happens, it is jaw-dropping. It's unbelievable. What a movie.
Let's get into another Andrei Tarkovsky film. We have The Mirror, which is a semi-autobiographical film that he made, and it's a nonlinear structure story about a life he's experienced, memories, flashbacks, his time in war, his time after war, before war. This movie, speaking of Nolan, in recently doing the interviews and talking about Ryan's Daughter, this is a movie that influenced Oppenheimer a lot, especially the aesthetics, the nonlinear story structure.
Oh, yeah, I can see that.
He's always been tied to nonlinear story structure, and I think this is a movie that's always been an inspiration for him in a lot of his movies, especially obviously like Memento and The Prestige.
Yeah.
But Oppenheimer, he said, was heavily influenced by this film, Mirror, from Tarkovsky. Check it out. It came out in 1975.
I can absolutely see that. Great point. He's a smart guy. Nolan reference.
Nolan reference.
All right, next up, we have our first Robert Altman film. At number 39, Robert Altman, all-time American director, just phenomenal filmmaker. He was known, obviously, for his ensemble casts and intersecting storylines between random characters. And Nashville, at number 39 on our list, is basically the epitome in his greatest accomplishment. This movie it's overwhelming in its scope, and it's massive. There's so many characters, and it's huge. We're talking about, like, there are sets with hundreds and hundreds of extras all over the place. It's a miracle of directing. Like, I don't know how he pulled this movie off because there's so much to it. And it takes place in Nashville, obviously, but we're getting all sorts of characters within the world of music or people who are fans of music intersecting in different ways. And the sound design of this movie is really top tier. I don't know how they did this film, but he also has a great sense for writing a character. Everybody feels unique, and the balancing act of all of these pieces, like this giant puzzle, and tying it all together is just a miracle, honestly. Like, Nashville is probably his greatest accomplishment as a filmmaker.
In 1976, we have Marathon Man, starring Dustin Hoffman, Laurence Olivier, and Roy Scheider. This is a sick movie. Dustin Hoffman plays a marathon runner whose brother...
It's
been... I don't do marathons anymore. However, his older brother, played by Roy Scheider, is a CIA a government agent chasing down a Nazi war criminal. He gets taken out, and somehow Dustin Hoffman's character gets involved in this crazy controversy and investigation, and comes broiled down with stolen gems in this Nazi underworld and Nazi criminals. It's freaking crazy.
Yeah, and great villain as well. and he's known as the dentist because his torture method when he was a Nazi was pulling teeth out. And so Dustin Hoffman, he has a pretty bad trip to the dentist in this film. Also, lots of running. So much running. I knew you would love this movie when you watched it. he does a lot of running.
It opens with a lot of running.
Yeah, it's great. All right, next up we have another Robert Redford film, also starring screen legend Paul Newman. At number 37, we have the Oscar winner for Best Picture as well as like 6 other Oscars, The Sting. This is an incredible film from George Roy Hill, who also directed The Pair in Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. Robert Redford and Paul Newman play small-time criminals who are setting up a great con. So their plan is to rip off a successful mob person, and in order to do that, they have to create a fake gambling ring. And so they spend the entire film crafting this and setting up this gambling ring for betting on horses, for playing poker, for whatever, and making it look legit so that when they get the guy in there, the con can work. But they also have to make it feel real. So like when there's horse racing going on, they have to actually be accurate to what the horse racing is happening on the news. And so they create this huge, elaborate plan, which is The Sting, in order to rip off this guy. And it's an incredible film. Robert Shaw, also in Jaws, he plays Quint. Incredible performance as the guy they're trying to con. This is a fantastic film. It deserved all of the Oscars. It won 8.3 on IMDb. Incredible movie. I highly recommend checking it out.
All right, let's do one more, and then we'll head to our intermission. How's that sound?
Sounds great.
Because we're already like 50-something minutes into this
Woo,
episode.
Cruising.
Let's talk about, in 1974, Scenes from a Marriage, which recently was remade with Oscar Isaac and Jessica Chastain in that arm kiss on the red carpet that just made
the arm rubbing kiss.
Oh man, it made waves. This is the original. This original is 1974, directed by Ingmar Bergman. It's about a similar plot. This married couple who on the surface, they have a facade of being very happy, the perfect couple. However, they do not get along anymore. They are constantly battling each other. And then the husband admits that he's been having an affair. And they sort of are trying to finalize a divorce and separate. However, as well as dating other people. However, they sort of reconnect or try to reconnect and are trying to make it work. But, you know, there are other obstacles in their way from keeping their marriage together. And it's a great film, and obviously, because it was remade again, obviously people love it.
It's 5 hours, too.
5 hours. Well, they
made it a miniseries.
TV series, right?
It's a very long movie, but it's worth it. It takes you a couple of days to watch it, though, but it's fantastic.
Couple of days.
Great acting.
All right, let's get into our intermission, everybody. And before we continue, the best way to support Raiders of the Lost Podcast is to become a patron at patreon.com/Raiders of the Lost Podcast. Now, Anthony, why the heck would you want to become a patron?
For all the perks.
You get awesome perks like access to the ad-free version of every single episode, not to mention weekly bonus episodes, as well as access to our Discord, merchandise, private watch parties, Discord watch parties. So much going on Patreon.
I also want to shout out Haley, Jacob, and Brody for joining this week.
Thank you so much for joining, everybody. Patreon is the only reason we can do this show full time. So thank you to everyone for your support on Patreon. Also, a great way to support the show is to leave those 5-star ratings and reviews on Spotify and Apple Podcast. At 5,000 Apple ratings, I will get a tattoo of Anthony's choosing. But we got to get those ratings first. And why I leave reviews? Because it's the best way for new people to discover our show on streaming platforms. It'll help us chart higher and just obviously make us look way more legit with tons of reviews and ratings.
Big time, guy.
We like to read the written ones out. I'll read one out in a minute, which is only on Apple.
And don't forget to leave us all... Shit.
What are you doing?
I said don't forget to leave us a review, and I was like, yeah, you just said that.
I already covered it, Anthony. And then the final way to support the show is to just share us with your family and friends. Word
share
of mouth
the load
is the best way for a podcast to grow. Thank you to everyone who shares us all the time.
This episode, of course, is sponsored by our friends at movieposters.com, the #1 place to get your movie posters online today. Be sure to use our promo code Raiders10 at movieposters.com to get 10% off your order right now. We just did a movie poster giveaway last week, so congratulations to that winner. We're going to do another one next week. This is a bi-monthly giveaway that we do with movieposters.com. If you need some posters in your life, you got to go there. Huge, large, whatever size you want, high-quality prints. We have these all over our set, and we also have them all over our home. These are incredible prints for everything you can think of, from movies to TV, all sorts of sizes, framing, and they even have backlighting if you want to deck your place out like a movie theater. So, for all of your poster needs, be sure to go to movieposters.com and use our promo code Raiders10 to save 10% off your order right now.
Let's get into the intermission and start with the movie quote competition. Are you ready?
Ready.
Here we go. Thank you, Sarah, for your courage through the dark years. I can't help you with what you must soon face, except to say that the future is not set.
Can you say it again?
Thank you, Sarah, for your courage through the dark years. I can't help you with what you must soon face, except to say that the future is not set. Almost got him.
Almost Terminator. Terminator. Because she's reading it to herself.
Yeah,
That's what threw me off.
End, yeah. So
that was good.
It's Kyle's voice while she's
she's reading the note.
Yeah.
That was good. That was good. Almost got me.
Almost. I was like, oh, I think we got him, people.
All right, here's two people talking in this one. Woman, can't live with them, can't live without them. Words of wisdom, my man. Words of wisdom.
Oh my God, what the fuck is this?
Now, I didn't say one of the characters' names in the line because I thought it would be too much of a giveaway, but I can say it if you want.
One more time. I'm pretty sure.
Do you want the guys?
Wait. I know what it is.
What is it?
It's The Departed.
Nope.
Wait, hold on. Say it one more time.
Do you want me to say the person's name in the line, or still try?
Just say the line. I thought it was a Jack quote from The Departed.
Can't live woman.
It's The Shining.
Yes, The Shining. You're right about Jack.
I knew it's Jack.
Yeah.
So it's all right.
Words of wisdom, Lloyd, my man. I felt like Lloyd would be too much of a giveaway.
Yeah, that would have been a giveaway. I knew it. Yeah, so I knew it was Jack.
Yeah, it's funny that Jack popped in your head for sure.
Immediately. That's a good quote. All right, Anthony.
Not that it's true. It's just good for the
It's a
character.
funny quote.
Yeah.
Guess this movie released here before Anthony gets canceled. Dead Poets Society.
1994.
1989.
Oh fuck, that's
89.
Old. Oh my god.
I mean, Ethan Hawke's a baby in that movie.
That's true. That's true.
Even Robin's very young in that film too.
Chris O'Donnell?
No, Robin Williams.
Oh, I thought you meant Robin. Like, I was thinking School Ties.
No.
Never mind. Yeah, Robin's young. All right, what year did Spartacus come out?
1962.
1960.
Wow, it's an
Close.
old movie. Holy
fucking awesome movie. Remember we watched that a couple years ago? We were like, holy fuck, this is awesome.
Yeah, like when they break out from the
oh my
the
god,
camp, it's fucking sick.
What a scene.
Yeah.
The set pieces in that were wild.
It's really cool. A lot of extras. Wow, that's so old. Well, I was only 2 off, but yeah. All right, next question. Pop quiz time. It's actually funny that, of course, you would pick The Shining for one of your pop quiz questions. So, name 5 characters from The Shining.
Lloyd, Wendy,
2,
Jack,
3,
what's his? Halloran?
4.
Is it O'Halloran or Halloran?
Halloran.
And then, fuck, hold up. Hold on.
Ah, did we get him?
Hold on. What's the fucking guy's name that tries to save them? What the fuck's his name? Hold on. We got Jack, Wendy.
No, you got it. So that's Halloran.
Oh, that's Halloran.
Yeah.
Who's the Who's the guy who interviews him? What's his fucking name? All right, hold on. We got Jack.
1.
We got Wendy.
2.
Danny.
3.
Lloyd.
4.
Halloran.
5. You got 5 because you were missing Danny.
Oh, Danny.
Yeah.
Okay.
You're thinking of Mr. Ullman.
Ullman. Thank you, Ullman.
Yeah.
Thank you. I got 5?
Yeah.
All right,
well,
nice.
because you didn't have Danny earlier.
I didn't say Danny
No,
earlier.
you didn't.
Oh, okay. Okay. Perfect.
Yeah. All right. So, and then you could have said Grady as well.
Grady.
So those are the main. Obviously, there are other characters, but those are the main.
There's so
7.
few characters in that movie.
I know. Yeah.
That's unbelievable.
It's really like 7 characters, and then some just extras.
I can't fucking believe that, man. I can't. That it makes you. Oh my god! I never really thought of that. How few characters there are in The Shining. All right, next up is my quiz question. Okay, so Eyes Wide Shut appeared in the Guinness Book of World Records with the record for the longest constant movie shoot. How many days?
From start of production to end of production.
Yeah, just how many days of shooting did it have?
420.
400. You were
Wow.
close. 400 days.
Holy crap. That's a long production.
Yeah, I read an interview with Vincent D'Onofrio, who had done Full Metal Jacket with Stanley before this, and he gave Nicole Kidman and Tom Cruise advice. He said to them, rent an apartment out in London because you'll be there for a while. Do not stay in a hotel. Rent a place.
Oh my god, that's funny.
All right. What? Oh, you got some haters.
Yeah, let's hear some unsubscribes, bud.
Let me pull up these haters.
Haterade.
Drinking that haterade, that unsubscribed hate.
Well, actually, we don't really have haters that we bring up anymore. It's always just the fun unsubscribes.
No, yeah, that's what.
They're
Yeah,
not haters.
Yeah. Because we don't even mess with hate comments.
I don't even look
anymore.
at comments anymore. I really don't. It's just ridiculous. We only look at unsubscribe comments, really.
Whenever I see hate comments, I just don't even reply anymore.
We look at Instagram and YouTube comments, but TikTok comments I stopped looking at.
All right, actually, so we recorded yesterday, and we have not received any unsubscribes since then.
No worries. I have a great 5-star written review that has an unsubscribe in it. So this is from Seth YM. I'm going to unsubscribe 5 stars. If you guys don't keep it up, I've been listening over a year now and have been hooked since the first episode I listened to. It really does feel like you're just hanging out with James and Anthony every episode, talking movies and just having a good time. You can tell these guys really know what they're talking about and they really love what they do. Thank you guys for the authenticity you bring to every episode and for the awesome recs like Kurosawa, silent films, and of course, Midnight Ruin!
Fuck yeah!
Which I managed to unironically use firing in all cylinders and knocked it out of the park in my review.
Thanks,
I'm guessing I'm becoming James. I mean Anthony. Wait, who says that? It's
We
Anthony.
both do.
Anthony says firing on all cylinders,
yes, I
and you
do.
say it knocked it out of the park too.
Yeah.
Jokes aside, you guys have really helped me learn more about the movies and the craft, something I've always enjoyed but have really become passionate about. Seth, thank you so much for that 5-star written review on Apple Podcasts. You are the best.
The boys!
Film boy!
Thanks, pal.
All right, what's your streaming recommendation for this episode, Anthony?
Joy is on Max, starring Jennifer Lawrence, Bradley Cooper, Robert De Niro. I think it's a really phenomenal, underappreciated film.
I also picked a film on Max. Well, I picked a trilogy,
Copycat.
technically. Planet of the Apes trilogy, The Rise, Dawn, and War for the Planet of the Apes. I recommend checking out because we're about to get the sequel, or legacy sequel, with Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, which comes out next weekend.
You get to see it before me.
Yeah, I'm seeing it on May 7th.
Yeah.
Sorry, bro.
Damn. Maybe I'm going to try and find a fan event I can see it at, maybe.
I hope it's good. It looks awesome. It really does.
Yeah.
It looks really terrific, so I'm excited for that film. I love
Terrific.
the Apes movies. Love the Apes movies. West Ball and Indie Circus.
Also, I saw Challengers last night. Phenomenal. It was so good.
Anthony's phenomenal. Challengers is phenomenal.
It was awesome. You've never seen a sports film like it. It's
All
so
right.
good.
Let's get back into our list of the 70 best movies of the 1970s. We have done so far 35 of them.
Yeah, we're at number 35 now.
And now we have 35 left.
This is the heavy hitters, man.
Would you like to take it away, Anthony?
I would love to take it away with 35 at Dog Day Afternoon from director Sidney Lumet and Al Pacino, John Cazale. Incredible film about a bank robbery gone wrong. This is such a legendary performance in a perfectly directed and executed film. In my opinion, this could be the best bank robber film of all time outside of Heat. And it's got a great blend of characters, an incredible story. It's just a landmark film in the crime genre, I would say.
Let's move on to George Lucas and his film American Graffiti, which came out in 1973. And if you like Dazed and Confused, if you like those great high school films,
If you like
cruising
pina
around,
coladas,
then you would like and love American Graffiti, which is an early role for Ron Howard, who obviously was an actor before he was a director. Happy Days, right?
Happy Days.
Happy Days, as well as
1, 2, 3, 4.
Happy Days. Richard Dreyfuss is in this film. Harrison Ford in an early role as well.
He's picking up girls in his car.
It's basically, that's what the movie is. Just it's the last day of summer. And last day of summer vacation in 1962, the year that movie takes place. And the guys and the girls, they're just cruising around looking for things to do while there's a DJ spinning some cool tracks. And it's just a vibe. It's literally, like Anthony said it perfectly earlier, where it captures teen life like never before, authenticity of what high school life is like, what young adults are like, driving around, partying,
The cars.
what we really do.
Yeah.
Hanging out in parking lots, trying to pick up girls,
Eating food.
It's perfect. It's an amazing movie, and like I said, if you like Dazed and Confused,
Yes.
you would love this movie.
This is the original Dazed and Confused.
$140 million box office.
Wow. What the fuck? No wonder.
That's not like a fake wow.
No
You're like, wow.
No wonder why he got money for New Hope. Holy shit. All right, next up we have Halloween from John Carpenter, the iconic slasher, Michael Myers' debut. We've done an entire episode breaking this film down. Jamie Lee Curtis as the original Scream Queen. Halloween is just such a legend in the horror genre and birthed so many births in this episode. It birthed the slasher pick in a huge way. Incredible score. One of John Carpenter's best for sure.
Moving on to Deliverance, which came out in 1972. This is a dark movie. It starts off so light and fun because we have these best friends. We have Burt Reynolds, Ned Beatty, and John Voight in this film, and they're all just like, we need a week away from the wives, the kids, the families, the jobs. So they spend a month, or they decide to take a week to go canoeing and camping in rural Georgia. However, they are not welcomed by the backwood locals. It starts weird at first, but then we have that kid playing banjo, which is sick. But then they get stalked by the locals, these dark, evil dudes. They are attacked multiple times. There are some graphic sequences, and it turns into a fight for survival.
Yeah, it's an incredible film. It's very disturbing, but also, oh my God, it's so good. It's very intense. And I think they did a great job with characters in this film. You know, I'm not spoiling much, but Burt Reynolds is the tough guy. He's the man. He's the hunter. But they basically take him out of the equation in a way. So John Voight, it's really John Voight is the person who's taking control, and he's basically, they're dependent on him, and he's not a survivalist. And so it's kind of like a fish out of water in a way with John Voight's character, which really helps the story. Because if it was just Burt Reynolds fucking people up, it wouldn't be that good of a movie. So that really raises the stakes, and it's an iconic movie, like so fucking good. All right, next up, we have another great film from Francis Ford Coppola. He squeezed this puppy in between the Godfathers.
Sick reference, bro. References to everybody knows it. That's a reference to The Gentleman.
The Conversation, which is one of the coolest movies of the decade, starring Gene Hackman, one of the greatest actors of the decade. This is about a surveillance expert who finds himself shrouded in this mystery, then struggling with paranoia, with the thrills of what's happening and with intense conflict and drama. It also has one of the greatest opening sequences of all time, which is the staging of basically him and his crew surveilling two people. And we get to see it filmed basically from an outside perspective. Great zoom-ins, perfection in terms of the filmmaking. This is one of the all-time great films in my opinion. The Conversation starring Gene Hackman, John Cazale as well, all over this list obviously. But I don't know how Coppola did this in between the Godfather movies because it's that good of a film.
It's that.
Double nominated that year.
That good.
With Godfather Part 2.
All right, let's move on to number 30 on our list. We have another Brian De Palma film from 1976. We have Carrie, based off the Stephen King novel of the same name, which is just an all-time horror film starring Sissy Spacek, who plays this young, quiet, shy girl, but who has sort of these abilities that she's kind of afraid to show people, with an insanely religious mother who at school is bullied and then is tricked into becoming the prom queen, and then pig's blood is dumped on her head, and she unleashes the wrath of her evil powers and eventually reveals herself to possibly be an Antichrist kind of character, a demonic character, and a great feud with her mother. It's awesome. It's epic. It's some of the most iconic imagery ever in a movie, as well as so many high school movies have sort of copied the trajectory of this film in terms of the climax. Not necessarily pig's blood and people getting murdered or burned alive inside of a massive gymnasium, but sort of the bullying of making this unpopular girl, tricking her into becoming popular is sort of a cliche that was all over the 80s and 90s and 2000s of high school movies.
It also has the great subtext of womanhood as the thorough line for the story, and the whole point of the story as well. Incredible film, and obviously an incredible book as well. But this really stamped Stephen King's name into the popular consciousness before The Shining did. And then it really was a huge hit for Brian De Palma and helped him solidify his career in Hollywood. All right, next up at 29, we have another Terrence Malick film. And unfortunately, after this film, he stopped making movies for a couple of decades. Days of Heaven, starring Richard Gere, which is one of the most beautifully filmed movies of all time. He plays a grifter, a swindler, with his partner and then a young boy, and they are traveling the world trying to find work. Sam Shepard plays a landowner and a farm owner. They end up working at his farm, and Richard Gere comes up with a great plan. What if we try and swindle him so you can marry him, and then we'll kill him and we'll get all of his money and his estate. However, things don't go according to plan, and it's a great depiction of love, of interpersonal relationships, as well as a beautiful period piece. Some of the most iconic shots in film history are in this movie. Again, just like a couple of movies on this list, if you're a fan of filmmaking and a fan of cinematography, this is a must-watch for sure.
Next up, we have another horror film, which was a landmark film that has been... It invented tropes. It was insanely influential. We have the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, directed by Tobe Hooper, who became, a horror legend because he made so many of these movies, creating the horror icon of Leatherface with this film all the way back in 1974. This movie, it's so gross, but so well made and disturbing, entertaining. It really just has this life of its own in a lot of ways when you watch it. It's just so absurd and crazy and fucked up, which is the best way to I think, describe it.
It was a time where the monster movie was very popular.
Yeah.
But he did an amazing job, and probably the best job ever, of showing humans as monsters. Like they don't feel like people. They're like monstrous. They're not human. They're inhuman.
So basically, this group of people, these young adults, are going to something about their grandfather's grave has been vandalized. They're going to check it out, and so they take a detour on this road trip at an old farmhouse of theirs. And next door neighbors, they find out, are these crazed people, this crazy family. Obviously, we all know what happens. You all know what happens in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Even if you haven't seen the original, you've seen all the sequels or some of them, I'm sure, and some of the reboots. But the original is still that good of a movie. It's just crafted to perfection, despite being so at times hard to watch. But it's brilliant.
Really ahead of its time filmmaking.
Yeah, it's
just
really great.
Minimalism, handheld, close quarters. Like, he was just doing stuff that wasn't commonly done.
Yeah.
Really, really well made. All right, next up at number 27, quite a turn here with Kramer versus Kramer, which is one of the great courtroom dramas and one of the great family dramas of all time, starring Dustin Hoffman and Meryl Streep, who are fighting over custody of their son. So Meryl Streep and Dustin Hoffman are married with a kid. He's a workaholic husband, and she has become tired and disillusioned with their life. And even though she loves her son, she leaves them. She leaves them to try and go start anew and live her own life for the first time ever. And then this workaholic father has to learn how to become a father, actually take care of his son for once. It's difficult. It's really funny at times. It's very endearing. He's not great at it, but then he slowly becomes a decent father and someone who has learned that, the relationship with my son is more important than anything, even my high-paying and high-level job. Until ultimately they create a credible bond, an incredible kinship, and truly do want to love one each other. And they've formed a new nest without the mother, without the wife. However, once that happens, Meryl Streep returns and she wants her son back. But Dustin Hoffman won't give him back. And so this starts a really incredible legal battle, courtroom drama, which is just such a heartstring puller and super incredible, super intense, and just an incredible set of performances, great screenplay, overall remarkable film.
In 1977, next we had David Lynch's Eraserhead, which is a messed up movie. It's very metaphorical. I would say it reminds me so much of Beau is Afraid, or Beau is Afraid reminds me of this movie, something similar, where we have this guy who lives alone, but then he finds out in a past fling of his, of the woman he had the fling with is pregnant, so he marries her and moves her into the apartment. They have the baby, who turns out to be this crazy lizard monster baby. And as well as there's lots of crazy things happening around his apartment. So for me, when I watch this movie, it sort of when I watched Beau is Afraid, it reminded me of this movie, sort of the metaphors of day-to-day life, how it can feel, and just taking that and expanding on that in a movie visually, and just like maybe, fatherhood. Maybe if you're a new parent, maybe this is a fun movie to watch to kind of reflect on my baby sometimes as a monster that I can't handle.
Yeah.
As well as the things that happen around the apartments with like the old lady. It's crazy.
Sound design.
Surreal as hell. And just so well crafted.
Yeah, it's incredible. Next up at number 25, we have Five Easy Pieces, another Jack Nicholson film, really launching him into superstar status with another Oscar nomination. This is also an interesting film because it depicts a character who's just not a good guy. So he plays this character who, he comes from upper class. He's a trained classical pianist, but he's rejected it all. He's just working on an oil rig now. He prefers to be in this blue-collar lifestyle, even though he doesn't have to be. And in a way, he's constantly battling with the world around him. His father becomes ill, so he goes back home to this upper-class world where he clearly does not fit in, and he becomes a violent aggressor for everyone, while also trying to court his sister-in-law. It's a really interesting film, fascinating performance, but I like this film a lot because it shows a character who's not a hero. He's not someone you should look up to, but also you can't help but watch him. And you're not so much rooting for him, but you're just fascinating watching his story unfold. And it really is comes down to what Jack does in this performance, because he's one of the greatest ever, and this is a great example of that.
Number 24, we have The Conformist, or Il Conformista, which is an Italian film from Bernardo Bertolucci. Came out in 1970. It takes place in Mussolini's fascist Italy, and it follows a member of the secret police in Mussolini's force who has plans to assassinate an old rival of his who's a professor and an outspoken anti-fascist in exile. And as he tries to go and do this murder, he soon falls for the man's wife, and his political leanings as well as his emotional leanings are tested as he falls for her.
Incredible filmmaking, cinematography, and production design. It's one of the best ever. Next up, at number 23, we have another Spielberg film, Close Encounters of the Third Kind. One of the greatest science fiction films of all time. Richard Dreyfuss is such a great lead in this movie. Phenomenal filmmaking. Truffaut, the director of Day for Night, actually has a role in this as the French scientist.
Oh, no way.
Yeah, it's a remarkable film. Such a great mystery and thrills, leading to a third act that is shocking and surprising. And it's a movie where you're watching it for the first time and you're like, I have no idea how this is going to end. But you can't stop watching it. It's a remarkable piece of science fiction.
Next up, we have the Best Picture winner from 1971, The French Connection, directed by William Friedkin, starring Gene Hackman, as well as Richard Dreyfuss, again on the list. That's like his sixth movie here, it feels like. And this is basically...
The French Connection?
No, Richard Dreyfuss.
Mm-hmm. Is he in The French Connection?
I'm sorry, Roy Scheider. Roy Scheider.
I was like, what?
Roy Scheider,
I was like, I thought you were looking at the IMDb, and I'm like, I must be crazy.
Roy Scheider, sixth time being on this list. I just totally had a brain fart on that. Roy Scheider, who it won't be the last time on this list either. Basically, it's about New York detectives and his partner chasing a heroin smuggler. It's epic.
French smugglers.
We have
They're French.
Possibly the best chase scene in cinema history. Really crazy stuff that they did on the streets of San Francisco. It's epic.
Awesome movie.
Epic, epic, epic.
We have another cop movie at number 21, and that's Serpico, starring Al Pacino, another Sidney Lumet film, one of the great directors of the time. And he plays a cop who refuses to go dirty, even in the smallest way, like getting a tuna sandwich for free. This makes him an outcast in the police force and eventually hated by everyone. And then he's then goes undercover. Basically, that's all he can do as a cop because no one will work with him. He is solidified in his status, and he will never bend the knee to the social structure that he's in. And he goes all the way to try his best to eradicate the dirtiness in the police force. And it's based on a true story. Incredible film and such a great performance from Pacino.
Next up, we have a Federico Fellini film from 1973. We have McCord, which I have not seen. Could you go into detail on this, Anthony?
Yeah, this is about a young boy who basically has interactions with so many various characters in his village, eccentric people. And it's also like 8.5, where it's dreamlike qualities to it. There's parallels and metaphors for the storytelling, not so much a plot, but it's an incredible use of color, incredible use of cinematography, costume design, and production design. It's very funny. Also showcases a love for cinema. Fellini's 8.5 is his masterpiece, but Amarcord is actually more personal to him and showcases events of his childhood that he put into this film. It's highly entertaining, and it's got a wonderful eclectic cast of characters. You've never seen anything like it before. Next up, at number 19, we have one of the greatest coming-of-age films of all time, and that is Kes, a remarkable film out of the UK. This is about a young boy who comes from a troubled home with no hope for any kind of future, and he one day stumbles upon an injured eagle. An injured hawk. He spends the next few weeks bringing the hawk back to health and eventually training it, and it becomes his passion and his really only friend in life. It's a very beautiful, moving, sweeping film about innocence, about the difficulty of the lives of some children in any area of the world, and how it's unfair the way some kids are born into broken homes. But it's a beautiful film. It'll break your heart. But it's also so beautiful, so beautiful.
Next up, we have possibly the greatest romantic comedy of all time. We have Annie Hall, written and directed by Woody Allen, also starring Diane Keaton, who became a fashion icon in this film as the character Annie Hall in her incredible wardrobe. Now, Annie Hall is a film that I think it's so well made and is timeless because it broke so many rules of cinema, so many rules of comedy. And Woody Allen, it opens with this monologue looking into camera lens with this blank background, telling the story about his relationship with Annie Hall, blending fantastical elements, surreal elements, and great comedy, great writing, and kind of just the mundane aspects of life of walking around, waiting in lines at movie theaters, things like that, just chatting and talking and getting to know somebody and just reminiscing on those memories of the past and just kind of examining your own life in a lot of ways from that lens, from a different perspective. And it's insanely funny, but also just so well made.
Yeah, I mean, and so great. So many great artistic moments, like breaking the fourth wall a couple of times. Then also,
that's how it opens.
Yeah, and then when she's high in the bedroom, it's like a ghost of her leaves the room or leaves the moment because he doesn't feel like he's with her because she's somewhere else. And so many great things like that you never see in a romantic comedy. It's just so well done. All right, number 17. We got a film starring the icons Robert Redford and Dustin Hoffman, based upon the Watergate drama, All the President's Men, the greatest journalism film of all time. This is about the Washington Post article which ran the Watergate scandal, uncovered all the evidence, and helped show the truth. This is a remarkable film, shot by Gordon Willis, the same cinematographer of The Godfather. Incredible performances from the leads. The entire cast, the entire ensemble is amazing. They really you feel like you're really in the world of a newsroom, really in the world of a paper. It's just a landmark in that genre. This also made journalists look very cool. It's a sick movie. One of the best of all time. It's great.
Next up, we have a Stanley Kubrick film. We have Barry Lyndon came out in 1975. I love this movie. And Barry Lyndon's one of my favorite characters in the world of Stanley Kubrick. He's so interesting. He's this Irishman who's basically turns into this con man out of survival and out of a desire to be something better and have something better in his life. He goes from being homeless and just becomes more adaptable and conniving and mischievous and rogue to the point where he becomes an aristocrat, marrying into wealth, marrying into aristocracy, and sort of just sucking at the teat of the upper class until he is one of them. And we have great sequences of incredible production design. This is done with no artificial lighting at all, which is incredible. Cinematography, I think, some of the best I've ever seen of the sky, let alone these great interiors and exteriors. And a lot of great duels are in this movie. It's very funny. It's camp at times. It's silly. It's frivolous. It's an absolute blast. And I love this movie so much.
If you like Yorgos Lanthimos and what he does, especially with the period piece, check this out. Because it has that vulgarity and that outlandishness and the sex and the ridiculouslousness of the aristocracies of that time.
It's coy with the audience, too, which is what I like about the tone.
Fantastic film. What a picture.
What a picture.
All right, next up we have one of the most influential films ever made, a movie that changed science fiction forever. At number 15, we have Star Wars, A New Hope, a landmark in cinematic language. George Lucas pulled off the impossible and made this incredible story about a kid from a desert planet who becomes a laser sword master, essentially. The Jedi, the Sith.
Way to put it.
The Jedi, the Sith, the lore, the characters, Darth Vader, Obi-Wan, so many iconic images, an incredible production, visual effects nobody had ever seen before, sheer brilliance. It showed the genius that George Lucas is in his full effect. And Star Wars is such an incredible film, and it really did change movies forever.
Wow, we're really in some top-tier stuff right
Yeah,
now.
we're getting good.
When Star Wars is at number 15, that's crazy. Let's move on to, in 1976, one of the greatest sports films ever made. We have Rocky, which is just an all-timer. Obviously starring Sylvester Stallone, written by Sylvester Stallone. However, he did not direct this one. It was John G. Avildsen, but he did direct the others after this. But Rocky, you've all seen it. It's the ultimate underdog story. This movie makes you run through a brick wall. It's about a nobody who becomes somebody out of chance, out of luck, and pursues that. You know, what happens? What do you do with an opportunity given to you, the opportunity of a lifetime? Do you embrace it? Do you attack it? Or do you just go back to being a nobody that you were before? And Rocky eventually embraces it and becomes a legend in this world, in the lore. And it's one of the most iconic characters in the history of cinema. There's a goddamn statue of him in Philadelphia. I love Rocky so much. I love the franchise. I love the character. Rocky Balboa, in my heart, is a legend, even though he's a fictional character. He's the best.
The best.
And Apollo Creed, come on.
Yeah,
Apollo Creed.
What a guy.
I love it.
At number 13, we have another Sidney Lumet film, Network, Oscar winner. This is an incredible depiction of the media. It's got some of the greatest monologues ever written, remarkable performances all around, and it shows how the media can be used to spread fear, how it can be used to control, and how it can be used to influence. And I think this film, Network, is as timely and relevant as it was the day it was made, because of the advent of 24-hour news cycle as well as social media and the internet. The Network is a phenomenal piece of filmmaking, and if you want to be an actor or you're just a fan of actors, check out Network. It's definitely one of the best acted movies on this list.
Speaking of best acted movies on this list, we have The Deer Hunter, which came out in 1978, which is one of the greatest war films ever made, starring Christopher Walken, Robert De Niro, John Cazale, and Meryl Streep. And it's about these longtime best friends who are from this local steel town who have one little hurrah before they get shipped off to the Vietnam War. And they go on a little hunting trip as well, hunting deer. And then they are thrust into war. And we have some of the most incredible imagery and scenes from war films of all time. I mean, just the sequences of the Russian roulette are just so insane. They're memorable. They just stand out in cinema history and war film history. De Niro is insanely good in this film. Christopher Walken won an Oscar for his performance in this role as well. It's dark. They show the inhumanities of humans in war, how it tears people apart. It's a POW camp war film as well. Mm-hmm. But it is a legendary film, and it's one of De Niro's best and Walken's best too.
You see this? This is this. This isn't anything else. This is this.
It's pretty good.
Love that line. All right, at number 11, we have another Jack movie. One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, winner of the Big Five. Perfect movie. One of the greatest endings of all time. Shocking. But also, it shows the eccentricities of the characters really well. And we have an incredible villain. And Jack Nicholson and the other performers, they're just remarkable. This is an incredible film. And I think it's one of the most likable characters of all time. Jack Nicholson's character, who's trying to just, take it easy. He's trying to dupe the system. And, he's kind of a jerk at first, but he grows to really love his new flatmates, you could say, at the hospital. However, his choices lead to ruin in a lot of ways. It becomes a very grim, very tragic tale. It's an incredibly powerful film. It's just unbelievable. If you haven't seen it, you got to watch One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. It lives up to all of the hype.
Let's head into a trippy film.
We're in the top 10.
At number 10 on our list, we have another Tarkovsky film. We have Stalker, which came out in 1979. This movie visually is stunning. It's surreal. It's meditative. And it's still a movie that's, tough to interpret for a lot of people. And the visuals are stunning, as well as it takes place in this unnamed country, this unnamed time. There's this post-apocalyptic wasteland called the Zone, and there's a guide who's leading a scientist and a teacher to this mythical room that's inside of the zone. You could say that this movie's about faith. It could be a Christian allegory, but it's just really surreal and meditative. The sound design's awesome, but also it has this crazy tone, this eerie feel about it. Just great cinematography. The locations are sensational, and it's a movie that you have to see it. You have to see it to kind of understand what this movie really is about. It's hard to sort of explain. And the ending's really weird too. The ending's really interesting with otherworldly powers going on, and there's a force. There's something there in this zone. There's some sort of being or power, something there that these men are attracted to and fear at the same time.
Yeah, it's an incredible film. At number 9, we have a Stanley Kubrick film, once more, with A Clockwork Orange, based upon the novel, starring Malcolm McDowell as Alex, one of the most interesting, insane, despicable characters ever put on film. It's a great dystopian film, and it's a movie about violence and about debauchery and about society. And a lot of messed up stuff happens in this movie, but it's all a depiction and a conversation of the world and about violence and about evil. And is evil made or is evil born? Alex is a really fascinating character to watch. This is a really cool film about being able to control a human being, being able to control emotion. And is that possible? And is that ethical to control a person's emotions in their mind? So many great sequences, so many great images in this film. One of a kind movie. There's really nothing like this in the world.
It's true. And then at number 8, a movie that just had a re-release in theaters that I checked out on Sunday because it's one of my all-time favorites. Alien from Ridley Scott came out in 1979, just changed the genre forever, not just for science fiction, but also alien movies in general. You've all seen Alien. We love this film. It's still going on, this franchise. It's still living on. We have Alien Romulus coming out this year. The Xenomorph is one of the most incredible movie monsters of all time. We've talked about this movie many times. It's one of our favorites. The music's incredible from Jerry Goldsmith. The filmmaking is expert from Ridley Scott's. The tone, the acting, Sigourney Weaver is terrific. It's just a perfect movie, just like The Xenomorph is a perfect specimen.
Nice.
Perfect movie.
You're going to see this tonight, aren't you?
Well, this movie, I've already seen it.
Yes.
Because we're posting this episode on Wednesday.
Yeah, but on this day we're recording, you're seeing it tonight.
True. I'm technically seeing it tonight.
Okay, thank you. Next up at number 7, we have Roman Polanski's Chinatown, another Jack movie. Probably the most consistent actor we've seen on this list, and for good reason. Chinatown is the epitome of the PI movie, the private investigator movie. Faye Dunaway's great. John Huston's fantastic as the villain in this. Ultimately, Jack as Giddys is just one of the great cop characters ever put on screen. Perfect screenplay. It's a great LA movie. It tells about corruption, the history of Los Angeles with water, before it was really the LA that we know today. Incredible filmmaking. I love Chinatown. We've done a great episode on it. Definitely check it out.
Your ums are off the charts, bud.
Sorry.
Ums are off the charts, bro. Let's move on to number 6. Guess who's back? William Friedkin with The Exorcist all the way back in 1973. He terrified the world with this incredible film. At the time, the most successful film ever made, or horror movie ever made.
Yeah, horror movie.
Rated R film ever released, I believe, when it came out.
Also, one of the great, most successful movies also. Of all.
$443 million in 1973 from this movie. I haven't seen this in a few years, but I watched it maybe 2 years ago for like the 10th time. It still terrifies me, man. It's still that good of a movie. The acting is just terrific. And I love heaven versus hell movies. I love angels and demons. Exorcism movies have just been demolished over the years. There's so many goddamn Exorcist movies. I mean, Russell Crowe is in 2 of them in the last 6 months. And as much as I like them, there's a little too many these days, especially we just had The Exorcist Believer, the legacy sequel to this movie that I'm going to pretend doesn't exist. But I think, Friedkin captured something really special with this original, not the original Exorcist movie, but it's the original best movie about exorcism.
Yeah, it's a masterpiece. Speaking of masterpiece horror films, we have Jaws, which I just watched the other day for like the 20th time. Incredible film, perfect directing. Spielberg just becoming the biggest director in Hollywood with one film. Jaws is one of a kind. Great performances from our trio. Perfect direction. The Jaws, it's one of a kind. You know how
many times have you seen Jaws, you think?
Honestly, it's got to be 25 times maybe.
I figured it'd be more than that.
It could be more than that. I might be underplaying it.
I've probably seen it like 20 times.
I've seen it. I've seen it a lot.
My entire life.
A lot.
Seen it quite a bit. Let's move into number 4 on our list. I'm sure y'all can kind of guess what we have left. We have right here, number 4, Francis Ford Coppola's The Godfather Part 2, which is a perfect film, a sequel to the brilliant Godfather, obviously. We have Michael Corleone, played by the great Al Pacino, and his rise of the family, as well as the backstory and prequel sort of story of Vito Corleone, played by Robert De Niro, as a young boy who goes from Italy, travels to New York City, Ellis Island, and then rises up the ranks of his neighborhood to eventually become the Don of the neighborhood. James Caan's in this as well, Diane Keaton, John Cazale, who's only in Oscar-nominated movies.
All on this
list, 5 movies. Talia Shire. Just a brilliant film. You've all seen it. We love it. We've done episodes on it. It's the best.
At number 3, we have Martin Scorsese's Taxi Driver. One of a kind. Robert De Niro's performance, the depiction of violence, Paul Schrader's screenplay, the narration, the score from Bernard Herrmann, the style, the substance, the disturbing nature, the direction of the story. It's an incredible film. One of my all-time favorites. It's not just a film boy movie. It's a lot more than that.
It's way more than
that. And it is one of the greatest films ever made, which is why it's number 3 on this list.
Number 2. We just did an episode on this a couple months ago. Another Coppola movie. We have Apocalypse Now. Came out in 1979, starring Martin Sheen, Dennis Hopper, and Marlon Brando. Of course, you checked out that episode, I'm sure. Apocalypse Now is one of the greatest war films of all time. It's a descent into the madness of what war does to people, does to the minds of men involved in war. And it's very meditative, surreal, explosive, and goddamn, it's just brilliant.
It's unbelievable.
Brilliant movie.
Unbelievable film. I can't believe he made it. I really can't.
I'm glad he made it.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just insane that he pulled this off.
It's fucking, what a picture. What a picture.
What a picture.
All right, we're down to the number 1 spot. Now, I'm sure some of you can guess what we haven't said yet. Now, this guy's been on our list a lot, especially in the last few films. Francis Ford Coppola has 3 spots in our top 5 films of the 1970s. And it's hard to argue against that because at number 1, we have The Godfather. It is, without a doubt, one of the greatest pieces of cinema ever put on screen. The performances, the characters, the cinematography from Gordon Willis, the wonderful score, the scope, the screenplay. There's just so much to this film. It has so much substance, so much subtext, so much great drama and stakes and moments. I can't think of a film that is better than this in the 1970s, and it's possibly, you could argue, the greatest film ever made. It could be the greatest film ever made, objectively.
Could be.
It might not be your favorite, but if you watch The Godfather, it's probably like, yeah, okay, that's the fucking best movie ever made.
It's up there. I think it's a top 5 best movie ever made. Sometimes I think of it as the best, sometimes not, but I think it's in that ballpark for sure. Not many movies are there, but that's a ballpark of best movie ever made.
And also, it's one of the great classic movies that is so rewatchable. So very rewatchable. And it depicts one of the greatest character arcs ever in history, and that's the Michael Corleone character arc, from someone who wants nothing to do with the family to someone who becomes voluntarily the Don of the Mafia.
Fuck yeah.
Fucking Coppola, man.
Coppola is the best. I cannot wait for Megalopolis. Holy crap. Well, that's our 70 best films of the 1970s. We really hope you enjoyed this list. Let us know what you think the best film from the 1970s films are from this era on Spotify and our prompts.
If you haven't seen any of these, we highly recommend you checking them out. And if you do watch them from this episode, let us know. We'd love to hear that.
Don't forget to donate to our new film, One Click. The Indiegogo page is live now. We posted it yesterday. Link in the description of all the episode links and bios. Don't forget to become a patron today at patreon.com/Raiders of the Lost Podcast. Leave those 5-star ratings and reviews on Spotify and Apple. And thanks for tuning in.
See you next time.
This episode was executive produced by our chosen one patrons, Cody Moen, Andrew Hagan, Becca Keene, Benjamin Cook, Calvin Murphy Griggs, Nicholas Martin, Darian Singleton, Tyler McFly, Andrew Hagan. Our chosen one patrons are our biggest supporters. Thank you so much. Raiders of the Lost Podcast is a mirror image production. Sound mixing done by Jacob Kossler. Opening music by Chase Jackson. Thank you for watching Raiders of the Lost Podcast. Be sure to hit that subscribe button, hit the like button as well, notifications for sure. Listen to the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, everywhere you can listen to podcasts, and be sure to check out this other content we have on our YouTube channel.